welcome to another interesting episode of our program. Today, we shall be focusing on Nigeria's policy on power. Nigeria is the biggest economy in Africa. That is not news. And now has the capacity and potential to play a more active role in the global economy than in the past. Actualizing this potential depends largely on the degree at which it can achieve one of the key Sustainable Development Goals, which is industrialization and the creation of conditions for long-term sustained growth and poverty reduction. So far, Nigeria has made very modest progress in terms of manufacturing development due to domestic policy failures, structural and infrastructural constraints, and a challenging global economic environment. Today, we shall be looking at the huge potential that needs to be exploited in the manufacturing sector, the unlocking of which requires addressing and lifting the binding constraints imposed by a falling national grid and poor access to affordable and stable power supply in Nigeria. We shall also be discussing reforms that need to be implemented by the Nigerian government to addressing lingering power problems and policy recommendations needed for the power sector to play a more supportive role in industrial and economic development process. I am Lydia Odijiochi. Do stay with us. I'll be back in a moment. Let's take our news update before we proceed.
The Ministry of Defense has expressed readiness to partner with the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies NIPSS in the fight against insecurity in Nigeria. This was during a courtesy visit by executives of the National Institute, led by the Director General, Professor Ayo Omotayo, in the Ship House in Abuja. Leader of the delegation, Professor Omotayo, congratulated the Defense Minister, Mohammed Badru Emenai, on his appointment as Minister of Defense, saying the institute was proud to have its member achieve such a great feat. He also stated the purpose of the visit, which was to solicit the support of the ministry in the areas of security, infrastructure, as well as deployment of more directing staff to the institute.
In 2022, we decided that not only will NIPSS submit party reports to the presidency, we will also engage in advocacy so that the outcome of the party reports can be made well known to those who may have to consume the outcome.
The Director of Studies, Professor O.J. Paramalam Emenai, appreciated the support of the ministry so far and emphasized the need for more female directing staff and participants to foster gender representation in the institute.
We will salute the Navy and the Air Force. They've been a little bit more forthcoming. We want to encourage the Nigerian Army as well to please, under your guidance, send us more women, not just as participants, but also as directing staff. I think we'll be sending a great message that the Nigerian military is keeping with the times and becoming much more gender representative.
Addressing delegates from the National Institute, the minister said there is need for the adoption of research results carried out by the institution over time to mitigate security threats and promote peace and stability in the region.
I believe some of the crises might require a non-kinetic, but some have to be kinetic at this stage. But it's something that we can sit down and partnership and work on it. I'm sure the Permanent Secretary will create an environment where this discussion will go on and we will see the terms of engagement on this matter with news.
The Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Defense, Dr. Ibrahim Kana Emenai, said the reform of the Ministry of Defense and its agencies is to bring cohesion as well as allow for prompt discharge of constitutional responsibilities of the armed forces.
Over time, because of some failures here and there, the armed forces are deeply involved. with the evolution of new MOT, the Armed Forces of Nigeria, we shall begin to see a repositioning of the armed forces into professionalism.
Chana Ejoga, reporting for NIPSS Policy TV.
It's new, it's fresh, it's all about policies and strategies. Watch out for NIPSS Policy TV programs on NTA News 24. Tune in on Mondays, Tuesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. on DSTV Channel 419, GoTV Channel 26, Star Times Channels 101 and 433, and Free TV Channel 703. Miss this and miss out on policies that will affect you and our country. Join us. Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us. If you are just joining us, the program is Nigeria's Policy on Power. The promise of energy mix comprising thermal, hydro, wind, and solar power has been a mirage, as many Nigerians are not connected to the national grid and have to source power from myriads of power such as the commonly known "I better pass my neighbor," that is generating sets, which causes environmental pollution. Some of these sets are powered by premium motor spirit, popularly called petrol and diesel, which poses great threat on industrialization and the cost of doing business, as most industrial machines run on power. The need to find lasting solution to this problem is undebatable. Our guest is Professor Yemi Oke of the Department of Energy and Electricity Law, University of Lagos. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
All right. How would you rate Nigeria's power sector in terms of power generation, transmission, and distribution?
The rating is abysmally poor. Definitely F9, if I must be honest with you. We're not doing well at all in terms of energy generation, transmission, and distribution. As a country of well over 200 million people, a country that should ordinarily be in a hurry for growth and development, and unfortunately, we don't have the energy to power our growth and economic development. And energy is central to all kinds of development, particularly economic development, even for security architecture. You know, the modern trend of policing is such that it is essentially high-tech and energy-driven. You can deploy all kinds of technology even for security. Whichever way we look at it, even for medical services, most equipment in the medical world now, they are high-tech and they depend on stable electricity supply. And even in teaching, education sector, whichever way you look at it, we don't even have the energy to power growth and development, sadly. And so we're not even generating enough, not to talk of distributing enough. Prior to privatization, Nigeria was around 3,000 megawatts. And more than 10 years after privatization, we're still hovering around 3,000, 3,500, 4,000. And we've recorded exceptional levels of grid failures, which even unprecedented, despite the fact that we are privatized. And the country is not even spending much more in a supposedly privatized power sector. This is also not acceptable. Whichever way we look at it, we're not generating enough. We're still generating 3,000 to 4,000 maximum in megawatts. There will be transmission losses. So once you generate 10, you can be sure you're going to lose 1 or 2. So we're transmitting less. Then we're distributing less. And definitely all is not well in the power sector, and a lot of money has gone down the drain in that very crucial sector. So we're not doing well at all. well below F.
Oh,
I
okay.
even score Nigeria minus F if there is a score for that.
Okay. Now, despite huge investments in the power sector, privatization and transformation of power institutions, the search for stable power remains elusive. What would you say is really the problem?
The problem is enormous. One, when we privatized, we didn't really look carefully well. We privatized those entities to wrong hands. And of course, some of us as experts we did one that we shouldn't be in a hurry to privatize everything. And even when we are privatizing, we indicated that we needed to be sure that these entities have the power, meaning the technical wherewithal, the financial muscles, and all it takes to take on the power asset and transform those. What happened when those entities were privatized? Of course, it took the last administration almost 7 years of consistent advocacies to admit that power assets were privatized as a matter of political patronage. Former President Buhari did say that. Sadly, we are saying, oh, all was not well, things were not properly done. At the tail end of his administration, he acknowledged on here that those entities were sold as a matter of political patronage, meaning they were just giving out to politically influential individuals and who had nothing really to do in the power sector. And what happened was that even we predicted in a number of media houses that Nigerian banks were going to cave in under excessive exposure in the power sector, meaning some of them lent money to power entities in excess of a single obligor limit, meaning this is the maximum amount you can lend to a particular individual. For instance, if the law says, oh, you can't give an individual more than $200 million at once, then you are lending $250, $300 over and above a single obligor limit to some of those entities. So the players, whichever way, I don't know how they did it, they approached the Nigerian banks to borrow dollars. Nigerian banks also collaborated with their foreign partners to access dollars. So we call it acquisition financing. You borrow money to acquire the asset. So a lot of them went to the Nigerian banks and accessed acquisition financing, money to acquire those assets. Unfortunately, they had no money to now run those assets. And we said those banks were going to be in trouble. And we predicted 5 banks were going to be in trouble. My last count, 4 banks went down the drain. I don't want to start to mention names of those banks because we won. And people came and said, oh, I mean, are you like a prophet of the doom or whatever? I said, no, you didn't need to be a prophet to know and predict accurately what was going to happen with our assets. So those banks went, and those companies bought those assets. Unfortunately, when they assessed those loans in dollars, dollar was 160 to 166 naira per dollar because we track all those developments. So when they borrow the money in dollars to buy those assets, the presumption is that they are going to make enough money. Now, it became very difficult for them now to meet their repayment obligation because dollars started going north. Dollar now moved from 160 to 200, and you know the current rate of naira to dollars now. Unfortunately, the services to be rendered now are to be rendered in naira. So if you need to now sell electricity at rate of 1,800 thereabout, I don't know what the dollar rate is saying now, to be able to break even, and they can't break even. And we now say these entities are not healthy, and that is why, as I've said severally, 90% of the discos are technically insolvent, meaning they're not making enough money. So they are running at a loss. And that's why Nigerians now witness a trend of liquidation, an appointment of receivership for most of those gencos. And we predicted all this was going to happen. And I blame it all on the regulator. Because if you're a regulator, and 95% of the entities that are to regulate are going down the drain. That shows a lack of serious regulation. And we've advocated knowledge-based regulation because once an entity is privatized, the job of government now is to regulate. And effectiveness of regulation is what will bring about the desired change in the sector. So we got it all messed up, and as far as the power sector is concerned, we really got it messed up. Honestly, from the beginning to the end, and we're still not out of the challenges yet. And that's
Okay,
why we have all those issues that we're having.
okay, Prof.
Remember,
Okay, Prof. Now, how do we address over reliance on alternative power sources caused by the shortage of clean power?
well, alternative sources is something that ordinarily we should go pari passu. We should go side by side with the conventional energy sources. Meaning, even in developed countries where they have stable electricity, you're still going to see a lot of solar panels on their roof. You still see windmills. You're going to see a lot of mini hydros side by side. One, entities are able to deploy those as a buffer, as an addition to their energy sources. Two, they are going to, over time, when it gets stable, they're going to now deploy self-generation, meaning instead of paying so much in electricity bills, you want to be self-reliant, that you don't have to pay bills to government or to the utility entities. And I mean, for instance, if Nigeria is self-sufficient in electricity, at some point, even if you are having 24-hour access and you are paying X amount of money, it gets to a level you don't want to pay that. So you want to self-generate the kind of energy you need, or you generate half of the energy that you need and rely on public utility for the remaining half. So it's something that has always, they've always gone together. They run together when you have grid-based or hub-based generation, conventional and non-conventional. And the trend is now that the world is going renewables, and that you see that even in the generally the general trend in energy consumption. You see a lot of cars that are now run on electric cars. And the question is, okay, the world is the energy, the dynamism of energy is somehow convoluted. The world is going renewable, the world is going by cleaner energies. Then assuming Nigeria now gets to the realm of electric cars, where is the power to charge your cars? Because even for our telephone, for our mobile telephones, Nigerians have had to rely on power banks and the rest to charge their phones. So now, if we now start to run or patronize electric cars, where are we going to get power to charge those cars? Because when we have electric cars, meaning you must have 24-hour access to electricity to charge your cars. We don't even have the electricity to charge those cars. So that's the challenge we're having as a country. So even in terms of the dynamism of energy, we are not even following the trend. It's like the world is leaving Nigeria behind.
Yes.
Because those countries that rely on electric cars and all those hybrid stuff, meaning they have it. So if you have cars in Nigeria, that means you're going to have charging stations everywhere. So where would those stations have energy to power their charging stations for Nigerians to charge their cars? So no, we don't even have energy to run our industries, to run homes, to charge cars. Even to charge our phones, we are relying on power banks. So it's a lot of challenges for us as a nation. I hope we can get to seriously address those major concerns.
That is the hope of every Nigerian. Now, many Nigerians argue that Nigeria can only daydream of industrial revolution if cheap, stable, and eco-friendly power supply is provided. What is your take on that?
Well, that's the way the world is going, because energy consumption is something that is inevitable. There's no way you're going to embark on any form of growth or development without different energy. So you need to consume energy to get those things done. And even in the realm of industrial revolution, it was extensively dependent on energy, coal. Those were not the kind of clean energy then. But then the world was evolving from coal to other forms of energy when they were running the steam engines and the rest in terms of industrial growth. For Nigeria, it will almost be a challenge. It's a challenge, but it may continue to be a challenge. Our growth of growth trajectory is such that we need energy to run it. If you're talking of financial technology, if you're talking of small scale, if you're talking of agro business, if you talk of whatever, health, industrial, manufacturing, services, whatever you deploy or you embark upon for every aspect of our national life, including security, you need energy. So you cannot talk of maximizing our energy sources, which is what we are advocating. Energy is such that is something that should or is readily available. For instance, you can talk of energy options. If you have stable rainfall, we can start to think seriously about mini hydros because you can generate energy from water. That's hydro. In certain part of the country that's a bit hot, we have stable sunshine. You can deploy excessive solar in those areas. There are certain parts of the country that is naturally wind turbine. You can deploy windmills and have those installed there. And even for our excessive landfills, where we have dumps, rescue dumps and all those stuff that we have along Lagos and other areas of the country, solid waste, you can generate power from renewable sources. People even generate energy from bush, with deploying the bushing technologies, the kind of technologies they use in Namibia and other countries. Energy is something that can generate from anywhere and everywhere. The question is, are we deploying those options? The answer is no. Some of those options are not cheap, they're very expensive. The ones that are not as expensive are the ones you are deploying, meaning you deploy gas and hydro. Those are affordable to an extent. But solar is also becoming relatively cheaper. But the resources to deploy those not there. So if you're going to set up your salon, hairdressing salon now, you're going to, of course, have your office or your installation attached to the disco so that you are metered for your consumption. You know that is not going to be reliable. On the other hand, you're going to have your small generator. You're going to rely on another diesel or petrol. Then maybe later you also want to have your solar panel 1 or 2 installed so that you can service your customers. So the trend is such that because of the level of unreliability of the supply, you have to marginalize your options. An average Nigerian may need 2 or 3 options of energy to run your business. And those are not cheap, they are very expensive. If something is not in abundant supply, it's not going to be that readily available or affordable. That's the challenge we're having as a country. And Nigerians may continue to pay more for electricity because we are not generating enough. And once there is insufficient generation, we ration the little that we have, and the suppliers will tend to, of course, play their balls and games, jacking up tariffs from time to time because the level of generation is not completed. Until we get to that level, we're still going to have these challenges as a nation.
Okay, now Nigeria has experienced or has been experiencing nationwide reoccurring grid collapse in recent times. In fact, as at this time, I've lost count. Now, what strategies should relevant agencies adopt in order to have stable and stronger national grid?
For several years, more than 20 years now, even before privatization, I've advocated a drift away from grid-based generation. The world is going off grid. The way grid technology work is that, for instance, Nigeria produces crude oil from the Niger Delta. Then you refine a petroleum product. You're now putting it in those pipelines to Kogi, Lokoja, Abeokuta, Ilorin, Enugu, Kaduna, Kano, Zamfara, Gizo, like that. And those pipelines have been installed like 100 years ago. The youngest of those ones, the most recent, probably 60 years ago. And you keep pumping those chemical-based components into it without regular maintenance. Over time, the pipeline will get very weak and they start to burst. That's exactly the challenge of our grid-based generation. It doesn't make sense to generate electricity in Kaduna, to generate in Kanji, to generate in Shiroro, and take it for Oshogbo, where you have the transmission line, and start to take it up north, including back to Oshogbo. Those are old structures, old models, because when they built those entities, they didn't envisage the kind of Nigeria that we have today. So we need to redo the grid itself. Countries are going extensively for grid. Countries are going mini grid. Countries are going regional grid, state-based grid. And that is why we advocated off-grid generation for Nigeria. So because those grid infrastructures are kind of weak, the grid infrastructure in Nigeria is essentially weak, dilapidated, and that's why we keep having this issue of grid collapses. And at some point, we predicted we're going to have, there was a particular year we predicted 14 in the year, and by August, we've had 11. And someone said, hey, what's happening? I said, well, we're not processing doom of a nation, the doom of the nation. We're saying there are things we ought to do that we haven't done. And those challenges are still there. So we continue to have grid collapses, no doubt, because of the dilapidated nature of our grid infrastructure. Government has tried its bit to revamp or scale up those grids, some of the installations and expansion of the grid. And the challenge is even that we have idle generations, idle megawatts that cannot be uploaded, because if the grid is designed, for instance, for 20 megawatts, if you put that, it's going to explode. So the capacity of the grid is limited. That is why we talk of idle generation, that some entities are saying they've generated, they can't transmit because the grid cannot take what they have generated. So we have a lot of idle megawatts generated at PPs that cannot be evacuated for purpose of transmission. So we have a lot of challenges in terms of grid, and we have advocated and still advocating off-grid solution, and even state-based grid structure. That's why we're happy when we have the new Electricity Act, which we said the whole law was not effective because the old Electric Power Sector Reform Act of 2005 was not actually intended as a piece of legislation to operationalize the power sector. By its name, it was meant to reform the power sector. We now argue that after the reforms, we now needed a law to operationalize the power sector, to structure certain things. And it took almost 10 years before the new law was passed. And the new law, of course, acceded to some of our requests, not all. And it's not a perfect piece of legislation, but then if we put it to very good use, it can achieve some of the objectives we had anticipated in the power sector. Now we have state-based generation. States now can generate, transmit, and distribute. And that's one issue that Nigerians should start to think seriously about. How many of the states in Nigeria are viable and will be in a position to generate, transmit, and distribute electricity? How many of the states have what it takes to attract foreign or local investment to generate electricity or distribute or transmit. The trend is such that at some point, some states may be able to do so. As some states may be on 24-hour supply, while some states are on 1 or 2 or even 0 supply, because the states are going to get competitive in terms of energy generation and transport. State A may generate so much and sell to state B. If state A is not ready, then state B may be growing and developing. And think that's competitive enough, but how many of the states will be able to attract investment? Because investment in the past is not a question of the governor, the handsomeness of the governor, or the beauty of the commissioner in charge. It's about whether the environment is conducive, whether investing in that entity or in that state will make commercial sense, whether you are going to be able to recoup your investment with good yield. Otherwise, the investors are not going to come. And those elements we call bankability issues will need to be addressed before a state can attract the kind of investment in the power sector. Because states now have what I call institutional responsibility, just like the federal government, to be able to generate, transport, and distribute electricity in their state. But for now, when maybe Lagos has done something and we now need to scale that up, we just find 1 or 2 other states, but then nothing on ground to show that any of the states is taking up the challenges of the new regime that gives them power to generate, transmit, and distribute electricity.
Still talking about our national grid. Would you say industrialization target 2030 agenda is still achievable?
It's achievable. Maybe 20, 30 years may be achievable if you start to think seriously about reworking the national grid. As I said, we can't be concentrating on the national grid because national grid is still updated and it's expensive to do the grid. And I said the world is going off grid. We need to balkanize the grid, break it down. There's no point having one humongous, idle, weak, dilapidated old grid that cannot serve the essence. A grid that cannot even take on board new megawatts that is generated. That's why we're having this trend of hydrogen grid that cannot be evacuated. So we need to first think about whether our grid, the current structure, is sufficient to take on board new generation. So if not, do we expand the grid? The answer is expand the grid. 2, decentralize the grid. 3, try go off the grid. We call it multi approach, multifaceted approach to power generation. So you don't want to concentrate your energy in the national grid alone.
Okay.
Some will go on grid, some will go off grid, some will go mini grid. But by the time we're talking of national grid, who talks of a nationalized grid in the 21st century? It's not done anywhere anymore because the dynamism of power generation and development is such that you wouldn't need to centralize things. So the grid, the national grid arrangement that we had was over centralization of electricity because then electricity was a national monopoly under NEPA and other entities before NEPA. Now that we have a decentralized structure, privatized structure, we don't need now to over centralize our grid structure. So the world is going off grid and decentralized grid. And that's what we now have under the Nigerian Constitution as amended because the issue of on-grid, off-grid dichotomy between the state and federal has been removed. And now state can generate off-grid and on-grid. So that's the way to go. Okay. And if we maximize all our options in the energy sector, achieving that the industrialization target will be realistic. But the science must be out there for us to see.
What are your thoughts in the area of internal and external collaborations as a way of finding long-term solutions to issues affecting the power sector?
The private sector, a lot of private sectors are getting off of the grid structure because you see what we have called captive and embedded generation. A lot of industries are now getting all the national grid and they are now self-reliant and self-generated. The collaboration you can talk about is when a company generates in excess of what they need, there should be a framework that will allow them to sell to their neighbors or other industries the excess that they have. And that's the kind of collaboration that we talked about. I think that's ongoing, but essentially now because of the franchising issues with the discos, I think some of them are faced with a bit of bureaucratic challenges in selling excess power to off-takers who are able to take on board those stuff. But I get those could be worked out and by the regulators.
Okay.
So collaboration, yes.
Are there government policies that gear towards investing in other sources of power so as to reduce overdependence on hydroelectricity?
Extensively, yeah, we have those. Well, even the fact that we have the constitution being amended now to say states in Nigeria can now generate power, distribute power, and transmit power, as against what we had. It shows a positive trend in line with global trend. Before, states cannot generate, transmit, or distribute in respect of areas covered by a national grid. Even under the law, the Constitution provides for that before the amendment. But federal government was still the one in charge of off-grid generation. And we kept pointing it at that federal government cannot deploy or generate off-grid or regulate off-grid. That took a while. But now we free the space. The state can generate either off-grid or on-grid. And I think that's the way to go. So we tend to see more of activities at the state level in the area of generation, transmission, and distribution.
Okay.
But then we are only anticipating and hoping.
Okay. In your opinion, what are the strengths and weaknesses of government policies on power?
Well, the past administration had good intentions, but those intentions did not manifest. But a lot is anticipated and expected from the current administration. And the logic is simple. There is a man, a president, who then as governor of Lagos State had experimented with the idea of state-based generation with the Lagos Enron project that was bought. We knew then, because I was involved at some point as a young lawyer then, we knew that it was the federal mind that made that impossible at some point. But now, nature has now made the same person the so-called federal might now. And as we say in my native language, he has the yam, he has the knife. So what he wanted to do that the federal might did not allow him to do in Lagos, he cannot do it at the national level. And there will be no federal might to stop him because he is not the federal might. So we expect a lot from the current administration, and people are even saying power sector will be one of the basis for assessing his success because he's been so passionate about power. And if at least now he has power, he has everything. So let him come and experiment all those lofty ideas he had as a governor, now that he's in charge. So people are going to mark him and assess him critically based on success in the power sector, another sector. So that's why a lot is expected from the current administration. And I know it will achieve success by the grace of God because it's in the interest of all Nigerians, all of us.
Finally, Prof, what framework, strategy, and possible policy recommendation would you suggest to revamp the power sector?
I have listed 20 before even the coming on board of the administration. And I don't know, honestly, where to start because I've documented it. I've been doing this research since I started pioneering electricity as a new field of law. But one thing I can advise is that we need, honestly, to rethink the ownership structure of the discos. The discos will need to go around invite another round of reacquisition and refinancing. Two, the regulator will need ability to be reduced. We can't see serious regulation yet in Nigeria. Three, we now need all these rural education agencies and rural education funds to be seeded up to state. When you call something rural, federal government cannot be dealing with rural-based issues. Those should be seeded up to the state, so that the state can now do something meaningful in that regard. It's over nationalization. When you talk of federal government doing state things at the level of the rural area, the rural education should be seeded up to the state, so that states can work with their local government and get things done. We should need rural-based electrification, meaning we should target 1 megawatts per state per local government in Nigeria. We have 774 local governments in Nigeria. If we deploy appropriate technologies and strategies to target at least 1 megawatt every other year from one state, it means in 4 years, a local government will generate 2 megawatts. If you multiply that by 774 local government that we have, that will more than double our existing capacity of 3,000, 4,000 megawatts. So there are a lot of strategies we can deploy. The issue is resources, finance, ability, and the political will to do so. But we have documented strategies to take it. And I've been giving it to people. I mean, nobody's been able to force those. We have them. It's about Nigeria, and Nigerians. I've not been kind of greedy about my ideas. I share it, and people say, "Oh, these are things we should do." But then some have been done. Still a lot yet to be done.
Okay, probably we'll engage you on that next time, but we want to really appreciate you, Professor Yemi Oke, Department of Energy and Electricity Law, University of Lagos, but he's joining us via Zoom from the UK. Thank you, Prof, for sharing your thoughts with us on the program. We really appreciate it.
Sincere thanks for having me. Have a good day.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Very, very poor. Very poor. Like you bring light in the night and then you use it around 4. You just take it. You just interrupt the light. It's very poor. Found it very poor. Rate of power supply is very poor. And we need the light because it fosters one to engage into many activities. Like you can use it to finance some businesses like that.
Because most of the industry in Nigeria, if you look at, I remember when we were much younger, there are a lot of industries in Nigeria, but you can't see them any longer. They are busy, in fact, most of them have exit Nigeria. I know some companies like PZ also, or let me say Unilever, they moved to Ghana. Ghana that we look down on Ghana, we see as Ghana is lower than Nigeria. But most of these companies are leaving Nigeria because there's no power supply. When there's no power supply, you don't expect these people to stay and do business in Nigeria. And if you look at it, the cost of diesel is on the high side. Now, if you power your generator on daily basis to do production, how much are you going to sell it to the masses? Definitely, it will be on the high side, which is not supposed to be. You know,
it has a negative impact on
serious negative impact on businesses. That's why most of the big industries. Presently, was it last month or so, Procter & Gamble, they are leaving Nigeria. They've given notice that they are leaving Nigeria because there's no steady power supply. And for how long are they going to be running on diesel? It's not proper, and it's going to be very costly. That's just it. If you go to some houses, you see they run on solar. In fact, we don't even need generator because it brings pollution. You discover that when we get all this air pollution is caused by generator. But if we can be able, if government itself can even give workers loan, solar loan, most houses power on solar, let me tell you, it will reduce the consumption of light. Yeah, it will make some of this industry be able to run. But that aside, they should be able to generate power as expected to over 100,000 megawatts.
Keep watching.
Keep watching. Keep watching NIPSS Policy TV.
Of the National Institute, which is the umbrella body for all graduates of the senior executive course of the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, NIPSS Kuro. Today we have the president of the association, who is Ambassador Emmanuel Obi-Okafor, MNI. It is a pleasure to have you, sir.
Thank you very much.
So, can you tell us what was your experience as a participant?
It was quite very inspiring. I was here in 2007, Sec 29, and it was quite an experience when you have about 60 members drawn from several institutions across the country at the topmost level of their career, stay 10 months together. It was quite very inspiring and very exciting, considering that Jos also was a very hospitable environment then. I'm still in touch with all my mates. In short, we have a platform. We call ourselves Namu Namu, our own. And we produced a lot of persons who are in the various key policy-making decisions in the country. Wow. It was quite 16 years ago. Wow. And each time I come to NIPSS, I still feel inspired. And we have every inspiration to give back to government for what it has done to our professional and private lives. Coming together here was quite a very good experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So you said each time you come back to NIPSS, which means you've been coming frequently.
Yes.
Is there anything that has changed for you, despite the nostalgic feeling?
Yes, a lot has changed. I can't find my way around NIPSS any longer. Wow. 2007, when I was here, there were not quite so many buildings. The hostel was not there. The new Director of Studies edifice was not there. So a lot has changed. Even when I was here in June, when we came for the AGM, we turned the sod for a new building. And surprisingly today, it's almost getting completed. Yeah. A lot has changed, and it's positively anyway.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
For which we are very grateful to the management of NIPSS.
That's nice. So can you tell us, how did you become president of the association of ANI?
Yeah, well, it's quite very interesting. There was an AGM on the 24th of June, just about 3 months ago. Wow. And I also would like to put it on point that I was the former vice president.
Wow.
I was a vice president for one term under former IGP, MD Abubakar. So I was groomed. And of course, taking over from the mantle was not very difficult because I had been a vice president before. I wouldn't say it's the first time a vice president became a president, but I'm only saying that it was an election that I overwhelmingly won to the glory of God.
So can you tell us the processes? What does it really take? As in, what are the criteria? What are the processes that you had to undergo to become, before you emerged as president?
Yeah, you must have commitment. I can tell you that when I left NIPSS in 2007, I had been very active in all NIPSS affairs, especially the Alumni Association Abuja chapter, where I'm still a member. I can tell you that 2008, I was appointed a member, secretary of the Foreign Relations Committee under General Ikenwachukwu. And all throughout the period, I had participated in various alumni functions and activities. I had been a member of the Lands Committee. I've been the chairman of the Policy Innovation Committee. I've been the deputy chairman of the Security and Defense Committee, so I had been very active. And probably in the recognition of all this, my overall performance and my engagement with ANI affairs, I have even hosted Abuja chapter to a meeting. Wow. I funded the meeting to show you that I love ANI. And due to this passion, I was overwhelmingly voted for.
That's good. It's a very interesting procedure and process to hear. And then what I really liked about what you said is the level of commitment, which means it also comes with consistency.
That is true.
So I want to also ask, have there been any pressure arising from the narrative that ANI is an elitist group? And what is your reaction to that?
Well, ANI is actually an elitist group if we're to look at it from that perspective. Because before, there are certain qualifications and criteria before you can become or participate in NIPSS. You must be a director in any of the federal government establishment, or you're a permanent secretary from the states. And for the states, you have only an opportunity of once every 4 years. So participants of ANI are carefully selected because they're expected to give back to the system what they have learned within the next 10 years. And if you reflect on those who have ruled this country, or those who have performed at a high level in this country, dating back to 1979 when NIPSS was established, you find them in the molds of President Ibrahim Babangida, you have President Abdul Salami, you have all captains of industries, you have top military and police and security service chiefs. They've all passed through ANI. So for those who claim ANI is an elitist organization, they're not far from the truth, because not everybody attends NIPSS. Only carefully selected personalities who are expected to give back. You can only give back if you have the ability to absorb. Thank you.
So as president of ANI, what are the dreams? What dreams do you have for Nigeria and the Institute?
Yeah, you find that the principal motive of establishing NIPSS is to be a policy bedrock for the country. Our dream is that we shall develop to the point that we can make good policies for government. You find that recently, some Nigerian governors went to Rwanda when we have NIPSS. NIPSS has the potential to provide all that we need for this country. And from 1979 till date, NIPSS has churned out several policy papers. A lot of them have been implemented by government. You say, we don't like going around beating our chest that, oh, this policy is from NIPSS, this policy is from NIPSS. Virtually, government listens to NIPSS. That is why the office of the vice president is in charge of NIPSS. And every year, government gives us themes for study and research for government. So my dream for NIPSS is that we'll continue to focus more on policy making for the government, and that it will get to a point that government cannot do without NIPSS. So far, we have had wonderful cooperation.
Nigeria is endowed with large oil, gas, hydro, and solar resources capable of generating sufficient electric power for existing plants. But in most days, the supply is insufficient for a country of over 200 million people. The best way to push economic growth and national development is to ensure the availability of stable and cheap power supply to push the growth of industrialization. This is how far we can go on the program today. Do join us for another educative and informative episode of Policy Focus. I remain Lydia Odidiochi. Thank you for being our guest, and goodbye.